This week we're here with Nathan Ward of Crestview Group. Nathan is our first in our electrical guests. We've featured a lot of mechanical guests so far. Today, Nathan is not only here to give us the electrical perspective, but also to talk about something a little bit more unique, solar. There's a lot of myths about solar. There's a lot of people that disagree, agree on the efficacy and the application of solar. And we're here to maybe bust some myths, ask some questions, and learn a little bit more about solar. Welcome, Nathan.
Thanks for having me here, guys.
That's awesome. Well, maybe you can give us a little bit of a background as to how you ended up in solar. Like how did you, what drew you to it?
Okay, so for me, I started as an electrician back in 2007.
Are you from BC?
No.
Okay.
No, all
What was that?
Hippies. Solar, come on.
not really much of a hippie guy. Never really identified. I mean,
He's very careful about how he said that. He's like, not really.
no, I'm pretty much a good old Alberta boy.
Okay. We'll allow it.
Yeah. Anyways, so how did I get into solar? So started as an electrician in 07.
Mm-hmm.
I worked for an oil and gas company, company that works primarily in the oil and gas industry, building control panels, contractor panels, programmable logic controller panels, things like that, specifically for the oil and gas industry. Did that about for 16 months or so, and then the patch slowed down. So great timing. So that was mid 09.
Yeah.
Just had my first kid. Got laid off 2 weeks later, and I was like, oh crap, what do I do?
Yeah.
So I get my resume up to date, start throwing resumes up there, and I send my resume to Crestview Electric, where I'm at now. So go to Crestview as a second-year electrician, complete my ticket there, start moving up. My first site with Crestview was actually the current owner's last site in the field as a foreman.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
got to know him pretty well there. So anyways, did my ticket with them. Meanwhile, just after I got into the trade back with that first company, my uncle, who had recommended me to apply at that first company, he told me, he's like, hey, you need to... shit.
It's fine.
Go for it. Go for it.
Right out.
Okay. Sorry. My uncle told me that, you know what, screw the apprenticeship. You need to come back and just work direct for DPH.
Okay.
So he called. So I'm like, it's 3 months in. I just got indentured. I'm not going to quit this now. So I keep going. I continue my apprenticeship. So meanwhile, back down the road to Crestview, when I get my journeyman ticket, he calls me up like the month that I get it. And he's like, okay, you got your ticket. Come apply. We need a guy with field skills.
Yeah.
So I apply and I get the job working for this engineering firm, DPH. They get acquired by what is now WSP. So fairly large engineering company. You might have heard of them.
Yeah.
So I worked there for a couple of years doing well site design and QA/QC for their field equipment. So kind of interesting. Allowed me to come full circle from building oil and gas control panels to now designing and doing the quality control for them.
Yeah.
So
How was that? You know, when you kind of go from, we talked to someone on the mechanical engineering side, you know, someone who came from the trade, and then they became a mechanical inspector for an engineering firm. Yeah. How is that, like, you know, the role reversal for you to be like somebody who's evaluating someone who was maybe your peer before?
It was fun. Well, that's the thing. Like, I knew exactly the common mistakes that were made because I went through them. I learned how not to make those mistakes twice and save the company money and create a better product for the client. So that's kind of one thing I took forward. Like, one thing one of my first journeymen said to me when I was working at that facility, they're like, treat each of these like a brand new car. We don't want to see any scratches on it. How would you like to buy a brand new car and see a scratch on the door? Don't scratch the door of this panel. It costs more than your car. So that's kind of where things were. So in terms of like dealing with people who used to be my peers, it wasn't a big deal. Like, all in all, like where I came out, I felt really blessed with where I was at. So no bad blood or anything.
Yeah.
And I felt more of a camaraderie with them than anything because I knew exactly what they were doing.
Yep.
So that was a lot of fun.
So a good time to kind of mentor and go through everything, all these new systems, especially if you're designing them.
Absolutely. So good to understand on the technical side of how to install it, how to design it properly, and different advantages from the installer side is what we can do better to make it easier, faster, cheaper.
Yep.
All things that are desirable.
Do you find that that's missing a lot where like the engineers have the equipment down, but maybe the installation specs aren't on
This isn't
par?
listened to by engineers, right? Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's a bit of a gap.
Would you give them feedback on that as well?
I try to. I still try to.
Yeah.
How do you find that feedback is received coming from the contractor
It really
side?
depends on the engineer.
Yeah.
I mean, lots of them are awesome guys. Go for beers with them, hang out. They're just people like anybody else.
Yeah.
Right. There's great guys, and then there's assholes.
Yeah.
Like some people get really uptight in terms of what they think they've designed and how effective they think it is. But then if I can take my real world experience and help them refine that and make it a little bit better, some people are like, awesome, great, thanks. This is a great partnership. This is great teamwork. And then there's other guys who are like, why didn't you do it my way? Why don't you want to do it my way? It's perfect.
Yeah. That's interesting. You know, there was a lot of that.
A lot of ego.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I think it's on both sides, right? Of
Absolutely.
course, right? And from the mechanical side, I know that there's a lot of engineers, I'm sure, where they love working with that person who's on site actually putting their design to life. And then there's a lot of people that have, that condescending perspective on, you're
chips on the shoulder.
a little bit of that, where it's like, do your job, install the product that I've designed. And then sometimes on the other side of the contractor where it's like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's designing. It's all crap. It's going to fail. So there's this like lackluster attitude with the way they go to install it.
Absolutely. And I don't mean to say that.
It's not a generalization.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
But it's always somewhere in the middle. It's always like
100%.
a shade of gray. It's
Absolutely.
never black or white.
So how do we get from, QA, QC and then
To
solar?
getting into solar. So
Yeah.
when I was working at that oil and gas engineering firm, we were seeing solar on projects here and there. And I'm like, this is good stuff. We should get this more places. So in my position, I had limited influence to make a difference and get solar on more projects. And after a couple of years working at this place, seeing middling success in getting people interested in solar and getting it on more projects, one of my instructors from SATE called me up and said, hey, we're hiring. You should come apply. So I applied, and I got the job to teach at SATE.
Oh, wow.
And so I taught in the electrical apprenticeship program at SATE. And during my time there, I actually developed the new solar course for SATE.
Oh, wow.
So all of this kind of growth in my career from like 2012 on has been like, how can I make the biggest difference in the province? How can I push things forward in terms of getting solar and renewable energy out there? So
Why solar? Why did you pick? What was that? Why not wind? Why not?
I think solar, because it's a relatively simple technology. So I brought some props here.
Perfect. That's your camera right there.
So this camera. So this is a single solar cell. So about 6 by 6 inches. You'll see this one's some cracks. It's a demo piece that I just have to show around. But the real reason I got this laminated like this is so you can see just how thin it is. It's just between two pieces of glass. So very, very simple, well, technically simple piece of machinery here. Take a look. So the only moving part in this is the electrons moving through the circuit. So when you install something like this, it really is incredibly low maintenance. The only things that are going to fail are the things with moving parts. So where do you have moving parts in the system? If you got a tracker system, the tracker could be a moving part. And if you have an inverter system that has fans in it, fans are a moving part. And then, of course, you've got more complicated power electronics. Those are a fail point. But otherwise, the cell itself, it doesn't really fail. Like, it'll degrade over time, certainly, and you'll see power production losses over time. But realistically, at the end of the day, 30 years down the line, 35 years down the line, 40 years down the line, it's still going to be producing something. Have you ever had a car last that long?
Yeah, fair point.
Like, it's a great
Have
piece
you?
of technology.
There was a different look there. 30-year-old car.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Usually, if it's out of warranty,
It's like 3 years. Jeff's like, I'm done.
Yeah.
It's not even 3 years. I used to kilometer my cars out, so it was every year.
Jeez, man.
But that was my company.
My heart feels for your lower back. Driving all that much? God.
I liked it.
So, anyways, yes, that's drew me to solar. The simplicity and elegance that there's not a lot of inputs other than the sun, right? Low maintenance inputs. So if you can just.
But are you also conducting energy with like temperature changes? Like a lot of some of the systems that I saw in Europe, they were actually like a tri-metal strip where as the temperature changed, that the expansion contraction would happen differently between the metals and actually create friction and energy from that.
That would be a different system. This is just solar PV or photovoltaics.
Yeah.
The system you're dealing with, I think, would be, I think it's a Seebeck effect generator with multiple layers of different metals, and then they essentially in the junction between them, you have a voltage differential. I think I got one of those on my fan. Oh, sorry about that.
Oh, that's fine.
On my wood stove fan.
Okay.
You know, one of the ones heat in the bottom, and then it's got all the fins on the top.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that may be the style of generator you're talking
So
about.
what does that do? Like what does that technology effectively do? Is that conduct? Does the
It's just
expansion
a
contract?
transference of energy.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's not
just-
light. It's not actually.
No,
light.
that's not related to the solar PV at all. It's just a more generating voltage from a thermal effect.
Oh, okay. But it's not like a heat. It's not a mechanical product. It's an electrical product. It uses the expansion contraction.
You could use it with either.
Exactly. So that'd be a great place to do energy harvest off of a boiler or whatever.
Yeah.
Create a tin can of these, drop it around a domestic hot water tank, and then you're harvesting that waste energy.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So like you're taking use of the jacket loss and the stack loss and stuff like that.
Things
Okay.
like that.
Okay.
So that would be one place you could use something like that. But, I don't know where else have you seen those? That sounds interesting.
It was actually in Denmark.
Tangent.
Yeah, well,
No.
that's what happens on the show.
Hey,
But what it was like, I think more so is that I saw that 10 years ago, right, in a Vegas trade show.
Oh yeah.
As like the new technology.
Yeah, but it's still not here. That was a Denmark company. And they were showcasing it, and I was like, man, that would work in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Right? Because Vancouver is when you need the heat and when you need the hot water, it's raining. So, in Calgary, at least like southern Alberta, you get so much sun that you can use stuff. So in Vancouver, because it would have the temperature differentials, then you could use the one that's not totally dependent on the sun.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. Yeah. So you were saying, so you got a basics photovoltaic panel.
Yeah.
That's your first component. And then that's
so as the base component, it's very simple, extremely long lifespan.
okay.
So to build a system around that, to me, just made sense. So after learning more, educating myself about it, and eventually getting myself to that point at SAIT where I'm able to be an expert and have done enough research and work with other amazing individuals to create that course.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's something here. So
What would be the typical, and maybe let's just say in Alberta, like breakdown rate of the components where like, would you lose 2% a year? Would you lose 5% a year? Like it still would harvest the electricity like sun, like the panels. You said that they break down after a while.
So the solar cells, typically for a silicon cell, they lose about 0.5% per year in production.
Okay.
So I think if we take about a 300 watt panel or so, at the end of 25 years, we're around 260 watts or so as a ballpark. I think that's correct. I'll fact check it later or something.
So is that so Tom will get
Tom will
that.
put it up on our screen. Yeah.
But so in saying that, will you oversize by 10 or 15% to accommodate for that?
About 10%. In the past, people have oversized by like 120%, 125% or so. But realistically, lately, I've only been going around 1.1 or 1.15.
Okay.
Just based on experience in the field and to get the most utilization out of the inverters we're dealing with.
Yeah. So, Alberta, we're a pretty, I'd say probably one of the better markets in Canada for solar. Right? Would you?
Absolutely, in terms of energy harvest, and a little less advantageous with our low energy prices right now.
Okay.
But, not bad.
Now, given that we're possibly one of the better markets for it, the constant, thing that you hear across the industry is that, solar, the ROI is either too long or too much, and it's not worth it to install. What do you say to those people that you encounter?
I say, what's your frame of reference? So
Okay.
most of these, one other unfortunate thing about Alberta, a lot of people's frame of reference is oil and gas projects. And if they're not positive in 18 months, well, it's not worth doing that project.
Yeah.
So if that's their frame of reference,
What kind of projects are you actually designing for? Like, is it anywhere from residential, single-family homes, right up to commercial, industrial jobs?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and where are you seeing the greatest interest?
Right now, I've seen the greatest interest in the commercial space. Before, with the rebate program, that things were booming in the residential side.
Yeah.
Lately, with COVID, I've seen a bit of a boost back to have a residential market again. People have been reaching out, and I've been doing designs and winning a few jobs.
Do you think a bit of that is like the fear of like dependence?
Absolutely.
Okay. People just want to be independent, have their own power supply, have their own.
Yeah, but having their own power supply, a lot of what I do, it feels like most of what I do some days is education, just letting people know that, hey, the systems we're designing, you don't need batteries or you won't have batteries with this system. And it's not necessary because we got an incredibly reliable grid.
So what is that? So that the education that you're doing to most of the homeowners, and this is something that we talked about yesterday, is we really want to educate the consumer, the homeowner. I know that we're appealing to a lot of contractors and trying to aim the show to contractors, but at the same time, there's going to be a lot of civilians and people that are not in the industry. Civilians,
Shit
man.
got real for us.
But what do you, when you go into these homes where people are maybe not mechanically inclined or electrically inclined, what is the conversation? What are these common things that you're either, turning people around on or changing their viewpoint on?
Yeah, so a lot of it, as we were saying earlier, is myth busting. So I brought a few myths.
Yeah, please, let's get into it. Yeah.
Common things people say to me. So snow and or cold. So everybody says, oh, it's pretty snowy here. They don't work in the snow, do they? But they actually do. They produce quite well. There's actually a study done out of NATE, and actually I've been hoping to replicate it in town here at our shop. Just haven't got around to it yet.
I got a big garage here.
Let's get her done. So anyways, this study at NATE, they took two identical arrays of solar modules. So, solar module, it's a term that is the more technical term for a solar panel. I may use the two interchangeably.
Yeah. Solar module, solar panel, interchangeable. Okay.
Anyways, the array is the assembly of solar modules, solar panels.
Yep.
So what NATE did, they got them all at these different angles of typical roofs, anywhere from 90 degrees down to, I think the lowest was 5 or 10 degrees.
Okay.
And they built two identical slope structures like this, and they added microinverters to the system. So microinverters is a small scale inverter that takes the energy from one solar panel and then transforms it into AC right there. So that allowed them to directly identify how much energy each of these modules is producing at the amount of irradiance or the amount of sunlight that it's getting throughout the year. So what they did with it, one side of the array, they would, anytime it would snow, they'd go up there and sweep it off.
Yeah.
The other side of the array, they didn't do anything to.
Just let it melt.
Just let it melt. And I think the overall energy difference at various angles was on average about 5%. So
not worth paying somebody to come and sweep.
Does that mean that?
Funny story about that.
Okay. No, let's do it. Let's do it. Yeah.
So back in October this year, I finally put solar on my own roof, and I've done dozens and dozens of residential systems. And one thing I'm always telling people, again on the education side, is You don't need to go on your roof to sweep it. You don't need to go on your roof to sweep it. You don't need to go on your roof to sweep it. It's not worth it. The energy price isn't there. There's no reason to do it. So I finished it the evening before. The very first full day it would have been operational. It snowed. So of course, and like doing this as a living, I got off in my head about, I need to see what a day's production's like.
Yeah.
So I went up on the roof and I shoveled it, and it worked great for 39 out of 40 panels. And as I was sweeping out that very last one, down off the roof, bounced to the shed, bounced to the ground.
Oh, you were the panel.
I did.
Oh,
So that's my crazy dumb story for the podcast.
so moral of the story is don't climb your roof.
Don't climb your roof, and if you do it, harness up.
Yeah.
So
Safety first.
safety first.
Captain Hook over here.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's my silly story of mistakes not to make. Follow your own advice. Right?
Yeah.
It's not one of those do as I say, not as I do things.
Yeah. So in that that study, that experiment, that model, do you think that the negligible difference, the 5% difference between snow being brushed off the panels versus not, do you think that the sun's rays are able to penetrate through snow? Is it translucent? Is it refracting it? What's
depending on the thickness of the snowfall, you will be generating some energy out of it. And one nice thing you can see with the solar modules, if you look at an array in the neighborhood somewhere, as soon as part of that module gets exposed, you're seeing some heat generation, right? You've got that heating effect of the typical dark, whether it's blue or black style cell, taking that heat energy. And then you've got a glass surface. Well, when you have heat in a glass surface, that snow slides off pretty darn quick. Mm-hmm. So
yeah.
So you must get asked, what am I going to save on my electric bill every month?
Yeah, so that totally depends on what your usage is. That's the other thing that I need to educate people on. Like, well, everybody says, what's the average? What's the average? Well, I can tell you right now, the average Alberta energy use for the average family home, which nobody has, by the way.
That's so funny. I get these reports all the time from the the utility provider, and it's like, your home, similar homes in your area, and then the average energy efficient home, and I'm just like, man, I am doing a terrible job of turning off lights in my house. I thought I put LEDs and everything, but it's just like there's me, and then like everybody else is like there for like efficient energy consumption. So yeah, I mean, what is that average home?
The average energy usage for the typical family home is around 7,000 kilowatt hours a year, I think.
7,000 kilowatts.
7,000 kilowatt hours a year. So if we're installing a solar system to generate that much energy, or targeting to generate that much energy. For argument's sake, let's say we've got a south-facing roof line. We want somewhere around probably 3 kilowatts or so of solar, and we want that to be ideally facing south around 26, 30 degrees, something like that, just the average home. And
so those are the rules of thumb. South-facing, 26, 30 degrees.
Just establishing some ballparks for our example here. So if we want about 3 kilowatts on the average family home, based on the cost of buying the equipment, installing it, modules, permitting, et cetera, and assuming there's no extraneous things that you need for the install, like a panel upgrade or anything like that. Sorry, electrical panel upgrade, not solar. But so something like that. Let's say 3 kilowatts costs you around 10 grand. Mm-hmm. So 10 grand, and then that's going to generate very close to that 7,000 kilowatt hours a year or so.
Of course, that is give or take.
A lot. So there's a lot of factors there.
Okay, and then
maybe closer to 3.5 to get closer, a little closer to that 7.
In what average circumstance can people see? Does that what does that ROI look like for someone?
So again, that's totally going to change with price of electricity changing.
Mm-hmm. And how often does that change in a place like Alberta?
Not that much. Was it last winter? We were down around 3.5 cents kilowatt hour.
I was in Vancouver. You don't want to know how much electricity is there.
Possibly.
I think that was correct.
Okay.
But regardless, we were that low not that long ago. It doesn't seem that long. Now I think we're around 8 or 9 cents kilowatt hour.
Okay.
So we've gone up significantly.
Mm-hmm.
Could the price of electricity continue to rise? I sure hope so. So again, it depends on what your prediction of the future is. Do we think the price of electricity is going to go down or up? I would wager it's going to go up, right? We've got things like carbon tax coming in. We've got...
So how significant are rebates for your industry or solar?
I don't...
Because there was a time when NMAX had like a incredible rebate on solar.
Don't think that's with NMAX directly. So there was the provincial RCSP, the Residential Commercial Solar Program.
Okay.
And
sorry, it was probably NMAX that was advertising.
Yeah, of course. They've got they do a lot of solar in the province here.
Yeah.
So the RCSP program, they were about, oh God, I'm totally blanking on it. It was gone.
Well, it was something significant. It was like if $7,500 and you had got an instant rebate of like $5,000.
Okay. Oh, maybe that is an NMAX specific thing.
Oh, okay, yeah. And so I was looking at that a couple of years ago, going, that's a no-brainer. Like you might as well just do it at this point, right? Because it was incredible. But why they canceled it is nobody did it. Like nobody jumped on it. It's like, well, this is a waste of time to even print all the, because they're still doing print, of course. Like we don't want to go that green.
Yeah.
So do you think if there was a rebate program out there that it would drive the market?
It certainly would. We had great adoption with the RCSP program. I'm blanking on the actual numbers as to what the different rates were, but they were good. Like it's a significant amount of money for the project and it helps people out, helps people adopt it and deal with that upfront cost, which is the hardest hurdle for everybody to get over.
Yeah. Like you said, it's like $10,000.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It's not a small amount.
I don't have $10,000 kicking around in my back pocket that I can just chuck out the door.
Yeah.
Really?
Right?
I'm just kidding.
Oh, I forgot I was contracted. made of money, right? But no. Again, it gives that upfront money payback, and with solar, it's, as I said, very very low risk, very long. It's got a lot of longevity to it for the install. So, with all that longevity, it's a very low risk asset you're purchasing, and for a lot of homeowners, when I'm discussing it with them, I get them to think of it like a bathroom rental or a kitchen rental. So you're going to spend between $5,000 to $10,000, maybe $15,000, could be more. What's the ROI on that kitchen rental? What's the ROI on that bathroom rental?
Well,
does it actually?
Well, I guess getting into that, but then you're also talking about property value increases. So does solar offer that? Like, is that recognized as a?
There really isn't any good data. I could say absolutely it is, but
it's all in the eye of the beholder.
Exactly.
Right? So
it's what is it's more a bigger driver is what the market as a whole is like, not what one specific home is like.
So
back to that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. Go ahead.
Oh, you can interrupt him. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. So for the ROI, so your bathroom rental, 5 years down the road, it's kind of out of date now, isn't it?
Yeah.
5 years down the road, your solar install, it's still producing energy. My bill last month was negative $150. I got a $150 credit on my bill. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So think of it that way, like
interesting.
Low risk investment. You can directly see those paybacks, but it is a longer term payback. So if you're going to stay in your house for 10 to 15 years, absolutely go for it. No brainer.
So what kind of square footage would you need on your roof in order to get 3.5 kilowatts?
Terrible square footage.
Well, what's a panel?
So
like, would you do three panels?
If you think of a typical 60 cell module, that's about a meter by meter and a half or so. 72 cell module is more a commercial version. That's about a meter by 2 meters. So let's say with a 60 cell module, right now I'm installing between 310 watt to 345 watt or so. That's going to be, so 3 of them is a kilowatt. So
roughly 9 panels.
Yeah. 9
so
panels.
9 meters by a meter and a half or by 3 meters.
Exactly.
Okay.
Interesting. Now, I know that.
So that would fit on my garage, is what you're saying.
Basically,
for the testing.
every
Sorry.
single
Have I got a deal for
conversation,
you?
every single conversation topic, Jeff is going to try to like bring it back to. So my roof doesn't have a solar system yet.
Yeah.
We got to make it relatable.
I only moved into the house. Like, give me some time.
Speaking of which,
I just got my lawn cut. Like, geez.
speaking of new homes and moving into your new house, so there's one of the biggest builders in the Alberta area, the Western Canada area, just started to offer individual, all their single home packages now, all the new products that they're putting out there have they're not solar ready. They come with panels. And is that, so they're marketing it as a, green effort in that. And when we're talking about resale value and perceived value of the homes, is that something that you're seeing that more and more custom builders offer, day one, or is it just something that's seen as more of a choice for a person?
I've reached out to a few different home builders for programs like that. There honestly isn't a lot of interest.
No, eh?
No, I mean, the company that's doing that program,
Yeah.
is certainly a leader in that sense.
Yeah.
But as to how effective that is in making a difference, I think it's great.
Yeah. So with a lot of these products that come into the solar game, you have your actual panels itself, and then a lot of people talk about, you can harness some of that power, but if, let's say, you're in the negative balance, or you're generating more power than you're consuming, are you selling that power back, or are you able to kind of store that in the form of batteries and then use it? Or what do you usually find happens?
There certainly is a technology to store it and install a battery system
For the nuclear bunkers.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect.
The real preppers.
The preppers, yeah.
Yeah, you can do that. It's not really necessary though. Like,
What kind of cost would that add? Like 100% or?
it would be more than 200%.
Oh, really?
So $30,000 system.
At least.
So that would be for somebody who's like kind of out country living, prone to blackouts,
Exactly.
brownouts.
So if you're outside the city and you experience grid outages like multiple times a year for multiple hours or multiple days potentially, which really doesn't realistically describe many places in the province, then yeah, if you're in that location, you want to look at batteries. But if you're in a place like middle of Calgary, we got probably 99.98% uptime, probably lose power for all of 20 minutes a year in the middle of the night. So really not a big deal.
Huh.
So your ROI on those batteries is pretty low because we got an incredibly stable grid. You can think of the grid like your battery when you've got a grid-tied electrical system or grid-tied solar system. So
Yeah.
grid-tie, that's the what we call a system without batteries. Mm-hmm. So with your grid-tie solar system, where was I going with this?
Like in terms of bringing batteries into the home,
Yes.
the cost
Yeah,
involved.
so batteries not necessary. Number one, because of cost, and two, because of grid reliability. Because we don't have those desire points there's no real reason to have the batteries if you're in the city like this. So, in terms of your grid tie system, you are selling to the grid. You are sending power to the grid. That's another myth a lot of people say. If you generate more electricity than you're using, it just goes into the
abyss.
goes
Ethos.
out into the ether.
Do
You can't
you-
sell the grid.
Do you actually get the same rate as what you're paying?
No. So that's another thing. So your electricity rate is made up of an energy rate and a transmission and distribution rate, and then other fees as well.
Admin costs.
Admin costs, et cetera.
Metering costs.
So if I forget what I said earlier. Right now is energy around 8 cents or so a kilowatt hour.
Okay.
You're paying another 7 to 8 cents of fees on top of that. So your actual energy rate or the actual rate you're paying is your energy plus your fees. So we're somewhere around 14 cents kilowatt hour when you add in all those fees and everything. But when you're credited, you're only credited based on the energy. They're not going to give you back those fees. So with your solar, it's more advantageous to
I'm
you.
surprised they don't charge you fees for monitoring that.
For sure. So they don't they don't give you back those fees. So it's more worthwhile to you to use your loads when you're generating that energy. And that can be done by simple changes, like think your dishwasher. Most dishwashers these days have a little delay function on them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just got my wife.
Okay, this
a
is going to
dishwasher.
be a good one. Okay.
Yeah. She did not feel like dishwasher shopping. So she walked in and the guy's like, well, let me start with the best one and we'll go backwards. So he spent, like, he's asking
Jeff
us all
loved
these.
that.
Oh, yeah. Like, as a professional sales guy, I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Let's try it. So we walk over and we're there for 5 minutes. And how many features can you really talk about on a dishwasher? Like, it's quiet and it cleans your dishes.
That's it. That's all of them.
Yeah.
That's
like,
all the features.
Yeah. Congratulations. Oh, this one washes pots and pans. My wife decided she did not want a dishwasher shop. So she went, okay, well, let's buy that one then.
Oh, no.
And I went, do you not want to look at maybe somewhere in the middle? And she goes, well, he just said it was the best one. I went, oh.
Good night to your wallet.
Great
I
logic.
guess.
Great logic, yeah. So now I get to get
guess
the
that's
best
what you
tires for my Jeep to go off-road.
There you go.
The best
right?
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's our new logic.
Quid
in
pro
the
quo,
Swindells
right?
household.
That's how it works. I like the strategy there.
Yeah.
That's good.
So
one
the
for you, one
timer
for
on the
me.
this one I hope comes with a timer.
The delay start. I didn't realize that, where we are in Alberta, there's no peak off-peak hours. When I lived in Ontario, that was a thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Like you have power.
BC just went to that a couple of years ago too. The smart meters that during certain hours cost you more to operate.
Well, and BC also, I think I'm correct here, but they have also a thresholded system. So the first 1,200 kilowatt hours or so is at one rate, and then everything beyond that is at a higher rate as well.
like a marginal tax rate almost, right? Like this
Yeah.
to this, you pay this much, this to this, you pay this, but up to this, you pay a certain amount.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
I mean, we got a great dam system that we just put in there too.
So, in that, kind of in that conversation, something that we talked about with, quite a few of the people that we've had on the podcast has been, the manufacturing of solar, manufacturing of just equipment that you use on a project in general, right? Whether it's a boiler, whether it's a pipe, whether it's the wrench, the little nut, the screw, the whatever. How many Canadian manufacturers are out there?
I mean, there's Canadian Solar, but a significant portion of their stuff is actually made overseas.
Overseas, okay.
Other than that, there really isn't a lot for Canadian product in the market that I know of and deal with. That's
Okay.
that's tier one.
Okay. Oh, so you mean like high quality? like-
Exactly. It's got to be reliable. It's got to be vetted. It's got to be as important as the technology side is. It has to be bankable. The company's got to be around in 25 years,
Of course.
or otherwise the warranty's not worth the paper it's written on.
Yeah.
So in saying that,
Yeah.
are you familiar with what the pollution rates are creating these panels?
So there's a whole bunch of different sides to that story, depending on who's writing the narrative there.
Yeah.
I think some of the more qualified ways to debunk that, NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab in the States, I think they did a study, and I believe it was 2 to 3 years. The energy deficit of creating that panel is offset by its generation in that time.
Okay.
Again, that's going to depend on where you're mounting it. If you're mounting it on the north face of your roof, it may take a little longer.
Yeah.
But it's all about good design
Yeah.
as well. But
And like talking about pollution, like that's probably another bonus of not using batteries because those can have some significant
the
issues.
nickel and the
with-
cobalt and stuff that goes into it that are mined in countries that have, subpar human rights issues, and the quarrying for those precious
Ain't
metals.
nobody
or
got
whatever.
time for
Ain't
that.
nobody got time for that.
absolutely.
But no, it's crazy because you have these people that buy Priuses and electric cars, and then they stand on this
What I
like
drove here in. not a Prius.
right, and they stand on this moral high ground and say I'm better than you because my vehicle doesn't have emissions or whatever. But it's like, yeah, you know what? Everything has
It's
an
all got
effect.
embodied energy.
Yeah,
But I think with the hybrids, I think it's like a 6.5 to 7 year kind of break even on the cost of production on that for what what the emissions created in
Production.
batteries and everything like that versus a combustion engine. So anybody who doesn't keep their car for 6.5 or 7 years, you've actually created more pollution than
By buying that vehicle.
by buying that versus.
But it's good to know that from a solar panel perspective, that timeline and that payback on the the emissions is actually a 2 to 3 year. Again, depending on the installation parameters and how it works. Now, given that perspective, what do you think of like this growing trend? So I'm born and raised in Dubai, and I know that Dubai, while it may be on the cutting edge of architecture, and I feel like the landscape there, the cityscapes there, the architecture, the city planning there, they really work on this principle of you can't do it. How much money will it take, right? And
The aquarium,
right? I mean, everything there is just it's mega, right? And they just invested billions of dollars, or maybe $1 billion or $2 billion in a solar field. And I know this exists in a lot of different places. I'm sure it exists in Canada where you have rows and rows and rows of solar fields.
Yep.
How often do these projects come along? Maybe not for on a regular basis for installation for maybe for yourself, but like, one, is that something that's has a lot of potential, and two, what is like the overall kind of impact of that?
So does it have potential in Dubai or over here or both?
No, anywhere. I mean, Dubai, it makes sense, but you also have other externalities there. But
yeah, in terms of the Dubai project, I think that's great signaling that they're doing that. I think it'll generate a lot more interest in those markets. It will see some production losses relative to a system similar size here, just because of the climate. So solar modules actually do better in the cold than they do in the heat.
Whoa, okay. So maybe we can unpack that a little bit more.
So that's another common myth. Back relating to the snow stuff, sure, snow will block it from light and they won't produce anything. No, they do. It's just reduced. And then snow slides off pretty quick. In terms of the cold is actually good for them. So the silicon cells, they have a negative temperature coefficient. So the colder they are, the higher the voltage they develop within that cell when exposed to sunlight. So the more voltage you have, the current is determined by the amount of radiance. The voltage is determined by the temperature, and thus the more your current times your voltage gives you your power.
Yep.
So the more power and the more energy you can generate in the wintertime. So
very interesting.
A bright, cold winter day versus a bright, warm summer day, you can generate more hour for hour in the wintertime.
That's crazy. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Is there
Overall,
any new panels that, like, I hear all these buildings that are coming up that they have windows that are actually panels?
Yeah, so interesting technology. I think it's really cool to see universities and things like that developing it. But we're probably 10 years away from significant commercialization.
Okay.
Speaking of that. Sorry, no, go ahead.
So that kind of leads me into thinking of building integrated solar. It's a great idea in theory, but anecdotally, I've had a lot of people tell me that after I've installed solar on their roof, they've run their air conditioner a lot less. So that's a double power savings. They're now generating their own power and they're running their air conditioner less, which is a huge load. And in my mind, the explanation of why this is happening, if you think of the amount of sunlight energy that's hitting your roof and then hitting your shingles and then transferring into your attic space. Attic space is incredibly warm. I don't know how much you plumbers crawl in roofs, but as an electrician, it's pretty terrible.
Lots. It sucks.
So you're able to lower that temperature of the attic space. Thus that...
Do apprentices count as plumbers?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not that.
Count as hammers.
I don't know. I'm not a plumber.
Apprentices count as the attic people.
Exactly.
Got to do attic work, buddy.
Just kidding. We like you and we need you. Keep applying.
Keep going to school, kids.
So, anyways, with the all that attic space and that extra heat in the attic space, that eventually transfers down through your installation and into your home. So, by lowering that attic temperature, we're able to run that air conditioner less and save them more money. In terms of building integrated PV, so now we're doing something like for example, the Tesla solar roof that hasn't really happened yet.
No?
Well,
In the U.S., they're doing
I've heard,
it. In
I've
Canada.
heard of some prototype ones.
So
but
it's not like actually out yet.
It doesn't seem to be.
Okay.
And, there's a lot of things to unpack with that.
I mean, everybody put their names in the pre-order because everybody thought it was cool. I put my name on that that battery, that the home battery that you could get.
The Powerwall.
I pre-ordered, the Powerwall. I pre-ordered that. Whatever. I think I had to pay like $20 to pre-order it. Elon's got my $20. So whenever that comes
welcome,
up,
SpaceX.
So the interesting thing is that there's all these different products coming out where you have solar shingles, and then I'd like to hear your perspective. I feel like Nathan is like bubbling. Nathan is like bubbling to talk.
He'll keep going. Like the fucking string that just keeps on winding in.
There's a snake in my boot. So the building integrated solar, when it's right up against a roof surface. Now, a traditional solar system, they have things like this. You've got your rail that the solar module sits on, and then this piece here, which is an L foot that supports the rail system up off the roof. So you've got between 3 and 6 inches gap to the bottom of the solar module. And then
So the module is on top of this, and then the roof is on below it. Okay.
I mean, proper aluminum frame module, and then clamped on there. How's that angle? Good. So you've got something like this. All that heat from their solar modules isn't going to transfer from the module frame into the rail, from the rail into the L foot into the attic.
Yeah.
So all that heat, you're having a bit of a chimney effect beneath the modules, and that heat is heading up and off the roof, not into the attic space. So that's why you get that cooling effect. Now, if you have a building integrated solar module, like a solar tile, all that heat's now in that space. And like I said before, with that negative temperature coefficient of silicon, then it's the cell's operating hotter, thus at a lower voltage, thus producing less power based on the installation conditions that you put it in.
Interesting.
So there are advantages of having it separate. And then think of this. If that system fails, what's the cost of me having a bundle of asphalt shingles in my garage if something happens to my roof? They're not a big cost. What's the cost of having a pallet of solar tiles in my garage?
But what would your warranty be on a panel? Because I think those roof panels were like 25-year warranty, which is the same as a shingle.
I think that Musk was saying his lifetime warranty. He's dropping kettlebells on.
Yeah,
but realistically, electronically, is it going to last that long? Maybe, maybe not. That's the other thing he hasn't really announced. Like, what's going on in terms of the power distribution for that? How are they interconnected? Who is doing that interconnection?
Yeah.
So I like the idea of having the solar separate from the roof surface. That way you're keeping your building envelope as intact as possible. And to me, it's way less issues.
Mm-hmm. What is the advantage of those solar panel shingles? Like if you were to, let's say, hey, there's something good about
aesthetics.
them.
They look good.
Yeah.
I mean, they look great.
That is I don't understand this whole like fashion, fashion dictates the world where like a product looks good, therefore it is good. And therefore it just like, this is like we had a very intense conversation about this yesterday where it's like the homeowner, and we were talking about this earlier, it's like the homeowner doesn't know what's actually good because they're told that like this, it's sexy, it's slick, it's awesome. Look at how amazing it looks and look at how it works. And I'm going to drop a kettlebell on it. I'm going to hit this truck with a sledgehammer and it's all amazing. But then like, what is it supposed to do?
Yeah.
It's supposed to create, it's electricity.
Create energy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it's, it does that at a significantly less, efficient rate than what a normal solar panel or, an array would do.
Yeah.
So that really bothers me when when they sell a system or a product based on how it looks, how it feels, how it installs, and how it and
ignoring the science side of things.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, my wife and I have a lot of debates about this. She's finishing school to be an interior designer, and it's all about you'll kind of get it. It's like it's how it looks and how it finishes, and then the functionality usually is either a secondary or an ancillary function of the aesthetic.
Yeah,
right. It's like it looks cool and it's storage, but the looks cool is the first part of it, right? Yeah. And that to me is such a cop out especially when you're talking about something as, the concept that it's a solar shingle. Solar is the first part, right? You got to do that job well, and then we can worry about whether or not. So the primary thing that, that we're talking about, from your perspective is that, yes, they work. They're going to do a decent job, but one of the key issues is that, you want to make sure that the temperature stays a bit lower so that the voltage is higher, therefore you can produce more energy.
Yeah, you'll get better utilization out of that roof space.
Yeah, I think
if you're
the
talking
other
about energy
side
production.
of it is also to give a shout out to my water people. You can do water tubes up there as well to create, which is something you can't do on a tile system, right?
No, why not?
At least not yet.
Even if you have a warm attic space, you can't do heat recovery off of that?
Well, no. Like what we're talking about with panels is going into a PV panel. You can do your panels for creating electricity, but then you can add a couple more for doing hot
water. Okay, and then that's is that the passive hot water heating? So we visited So what is that?
A good buddy of mine from my time at SAIT, and he's got his own thermal company. He does solar thermal as well as PV, and they typically use evacuated tubes. One interesting thing about those systems is they have to be, you guys should know this better than I do, so help me out.
Yeah.
But I think they got to be about an 80-degree angle or so, just because of the convection currents within the fluid inside them.
Yeah.
So, they're pretty neat technology. So one advantage of mixing the two systems is that with your solar cells, typically you're setting them on the same plane of the roof surface. So I could lay out the majority of the roof surface at that lower angle, basically matching the roof surface, and be great with solar PV. With the solar thermal, like the solar hydronic heating systems, you've got your evacuated tubes. You're going to set those up at that 80-degree angle or so. And I could put that by the peak where it's not really usable space for the solar PV, and get more energy utilization out of that roof space. So there's all kinds of interesting ways you can lay things.
How many people, when they're talking solar, number one, are they already convinced that solar is the way to go for them?
There's a significant portion. If I could break it down in terms of the style of customers that I see, there's the tech early adopter, the guy who wants to be the first on the block with solar on his roof. Mm-hmm. There's the
like me.
There's the free stuff guy sitting across the table.
Like me.
No, there's
Jeff's going to see how many of these categories he can fit into, and then it's going to be like, but my roof doesn't have solar panels yet, Nathan.
just tell your wife, Nathan said this one was the best.
I love you, honey.
So the tech early adopter, the environmentalist or aging hippie, who's done well in oil and gas and wants to
atone for his sins or her sins,
or again, that leads into the next category: the person with money to burn, or realizes the solid investment, but over the longer time horizon. So that one. What else is there? That's majority of the different styles I see. I mean, everybody's
and
a
how
blend.
many people will do the electricity and the water panels?
Very few. There's
okay.
The challenges with the solar thermal are now, unlike the solar PV, now you've got moving parts. You've got the glycol moving through the system. You need to maintain that. You need to have someone come into your home and maintain it if you're not able to do it yourself. And you've got pumps and other things like that to deal with in that system.
I have some questions on this, the solar water thing. It's new to me. I've only really experienced it. I mean, we went camping once, and it was like a off-grid campsite. They had, a school bus as a kitchen with a solar panel on it for the electricity in there, and then they had a passive heated shower. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's, a solar. It's not necessarily that. It's close. I think it was just like black PEX pipes spray painted black, and it's like passive heat. Yeah. But
it can be that simple though. Like
I've heated up my swimming pool.
A buddy of mine from growing up, he told me a story that his grandpa just took as simple as a garden hose, put it on his roof, painted black, and that was a way they could get extra hot water. It can be simple things like that.
Yeah.
But the more professional thermal systems, like you've got the evacuator tubes and all the rest, and it's essentially just an additional heat source for your domestic hot water tank.
Okay.
And then you'll typically have like an electric element as backup or something like that.
Or a boiler. So do you know if the solar is approved on like the agricultural communities, like the Growing It Forward program, stuff like that?
Yeah. There's a lot of people moving forward. The key is finding the right client who's interested in it for the right reasons and has the money to spend. Like,
what would greenhouses be? Somebody that would, like, it would be advantageous for them to consider it?
I'm working on a greenhouse project right now.
Because I know in the mechanical side, we would save 70%, right, of gas consumption. Their payback was 2.5 years. And I'm talking like $100,000 mechanical systems.
Fantastic.
Right. So with obviously the marijuana facilities that are popping up everywhere and especially in Alberta, like there is some significant, right at Edmonton Airport is one of the largest do we call them grow
we don't call them grow up anymore.
Do we call them farmers?
It's in Edmonton. There's one in Medicine Hat. There's all these facilities.
There's one scheduled for Sundre, which is going to be massive, but their issue is power.
Yeah. Right.
And so the town can't give them enough power because it's taking 70% of the power. So they want to use a gas generator to.
Yeah. Well, for a greenhouse, cogen totally makes sense. Hopefully I don't get killed by my solar cohorts for saying something like that. But it just makes sense to better utilize whatever energy source you're using. I'm not anti oil and gas or anything like that.
But you got to. They've got a significant amount of space that they could utilize.
Absolutely.
Those, right.
So if we're talking like the average greenhouse these days, are we talking about marijuana greenhouse, which is
agricultural because
more like a warehouse than anything else?
Yeah, they're like commercial, industrial factory grow.
Yeah, because they're not actually harvesting much sunlight and thermal energy.
That's right.
They're more just warehouse space and LED grow lighting and hydroponics inside typically.
I have a question: Is
so something like
using that glass greenhouse, technique, is that something that's not advisable for? I don't know the details of growing.
From what I've heard of the marijuana industry side, that they want tighter controls of things. So dealing with natural sunlight and the thermal losses associated with putting in a system that can harvest that sunlight. Mm-hmm. It's more advantageous for them to have a more warehouse style, essentially a box building that they can control the thermal envelope, control all the water and lighting inputs.
I've never seen anybody smash a window to steal a tomato. So.
That's true. That's a real thing though. We say it as a joke, but it's a real thing.
Not yet. There's lots of 2020 left.
COVID, BLM.
Alberta's economy is down. Let's face it.
I'll tell you what. I have a feeling that the pivot from energy, or I should say rather oil and gas, because energy is a very broad topic, is going to kind of end with, because Alberta's been the freest for the cannabis trade. I think that's something that we've talked about. Tom and I, he's behind the camera there, about having somebody from that industry who's done a lot of construction talk about the power requirements, the electrical requirements, the heating, the mechanical, the water, the lighting. There's so much that goes into this cannabis industry, and from a perspective of renewable energy and being able to use that, like solar seems like a bit of a no-brainer if you're in Alberta.
Absolutely. And I would love to do one of those projects if anybody's listening. That would be fantastic.
Nathan Ward, Crestview Solar. If you've got a weed operation,
we'll hook you
let them know.
Yeah. So I'm just starting to garden in the back.
Let's be real green with it. He's not letting it go.
It completely makes sense, though. Right? You can control all your loads. You can set all your timing, and the solar energy production over the day. For those that haven't seen what that looks like, you see a typical parabola. So, and if you got a nice clear morning, it'll be nice and round. If you got thunderstorms in the afternoon, it'll look like this on the backside. But otherwise, it's generally that bell shape, and you'll see that throughout the day. So if you've got that relatively known energy generation for the facilities like a greenhouse, they can set all their lighting timings. They can set all their valve timings and pumps and major loads to be operating during that peak production time to get that most value for it. Back to what I was saying earlier, like eliminating those fees by using that energy on self. Thus, it's not moving out through the meter, so you're not paying for it. So that's how you get the most value out of it, using that energy on site when you're generating it.
So, residential versus commercial. We can talk about, and I'd like to kind of split that into two-part conversation. One, what is your experience? Which sector has been more successful for you, kind of growing that segment of the business? And two, overall, just from your research in Canada and whatnot, what seems to be growing more for solar?
I think commercial is growing more.
Okay.
I mean, residential seems to be the early adopters, just because you get more of the hippie type or the people with money to burn. But commercially, people are starting to see the writing on the wall. They can see they have more long-term strategies you see in business. I mean, right now, a lot of people can't see past the end of their nose because of the trying times right now. But in general, more and more companies I talk to, they've got 5, 10, 15, 20-year plans for the business. And once they're looking at that scale, they can see that investment absolutely makes sense. It's cash flow positive and extremely low risk. That's something we should go for.
And that's something that we actually have talked about is businesses, even if they don't own the building, if they're going to be there for a long period of time, the one thing that they can control is their cost of operating, right? And going into solar and lowering your cost of operating is something that can actually make a difference for long-term success, right? I guess to put it into perspective, as electric cars are actually increasing, like in Vancouver, it's amazing how many electric cars are there, right? In Alberta, the energy is so cheap here that to get into an electric car is actually to run your house and your electric car. I mean, you're basically driving for free at that point.
Certainly.
So maybe this is are you talking about like how if you were to integrate solar into your home and you're potentially thinking about getting an electric car? Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's what I mean.
Yeah, it's absolutely a no-brainer. So, and most of the cars, they have a way to change the charging time. So with working from home and everything, I've got my car set up. So if it's plugged in anywhere past 9 in the morning, it'll charge up to 100%. So I can completely charge it off solar.
Huh.
Otherwise, if I'm working a typical day back in the office and I get home, I plug it in at 4:30, 5 o'clock or something like that, I still want to charge enough for the next day, which really I could drive a couple of days without charging it. So not a big deal, but plug it in anyway. I set it to charge only to 80% of the battery capacity. So that allows me to get a little more longevity out of the battery by not fully cycling it and use a little less energy.
Because that's one of the reasons why, if someone buys a electric vehicle in Alberta, the immediate response from their, peer group, their friend group is, what do you mean? You're just basically buying indirect gas or indirect oil or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's a long tailpipe.
Yeah, right. And so investing in solar, let's say for your home, and, you're really going that extra distance and, you're investing in not only the solar panels for your home, but also potentially, thinking about doing an electric vehicle. So what does that increase in that? Let's say that
consumption or
no, the investment for you in terms of how many, panels you need, the square footage or and maybe cost.
Again, depends on how far you drive.
Okay.
So I've got a relatively long commute and I've only had the electric car since February, I think about middle of February. So
okay. And it's a full electric vehicle.
Full electric.
Okay.
No, not a hybrid.
Okay.
So yeah, spending zero on gas has been awesome.
Yeah. Except when it's 69 cents for a liter.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with memes, but you remember Bad Luck Brian from back in the day? That was that was totally me. Yeah, buys an electric car. 2 weeks later, gas price drops to the lowest price in 25 years.
Yeah.
So what is that incremental cost if you want to, let's say you've got an existing solar system and now
you want to get that electric car and figure out how much you want to increase your solar system. if your solar system was initially sized to cover your energy usage over the year, then you could be adding anywhere between 20% or 50, 60, 80% more on top, depending on how much you drive. Like, what kind of car are you getting? What's the range like?
Well, if we base the average, I mean, they average out kilometers at 22,000 kilometers a year.
Yeah. So best way to break it down for me, I think, is my car outside, driving within the city. My average commute is about 14 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. So if we math that out to how much, if you take that math and figure out how much you yourself drive, that'll give you an idea of how much energy that car is going to need over time. Now, charging isn't 100% efficient, but if just using that as a back of the napkin, so we take that 14 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, figure out how many 100 kilometers you commute on the average day, week, month, year, and then we take your price of electricity. So right now we said it's around 8 cents, about 14, 15 cents when you add in all the fees. So then you can figure out how much it costs you to get to work. So my boss, shout out to Ryan, he bought a smart car, a full-on electric smart car.
Okay.
And I worked it out for him the other day. I think it's 36 cents for him to get to work.
36 cents.
So
I own a Jeep, so
So whatever the opposite of an electric
doesn't
vehicle
go-
is,
exactly.
it doesn't
it's usually
go
a
fast,
truck, but
and
it's
a
definitely
big
Jeff's Jeep.
windscreen.
The least aerodynamic, the most gas consuming, and it's like if the weight and the height wasn't enough, it's like, let's add a tent on it. Let's put some extra gears. Let's lift it up. Let's make it look real nice, baby.
I like playing in the trees. I'm also a hippie.
Different type of hippie.
Oh yeah.
So in that scenario, I'm sure you've done a lot of research into electric vehicles, given that you're a solar nut. And maybe this is, and I don't want you to feel like this is out of your purview, and you don't want to make an expert comment on it. But if you were to say, in terms of this is a bonus material, we'll call it. If you were to say, from your knowledge, being an electrician, being a solar, fan, and an expert, what electric vehicle would you suggest that the common person invest in? Just based on the consumptions and all the different parameters.
We're going blank on this, right, Tom? Like, this is where sponsorship entered here.
Well,
This episode is brought to you by Bleep.
So are we saying names? Or?
No, go ahead. Go
so
ahead.
Yeah.
My car, I got a used Kia Soul. It's
Okay.
great,
Fully electric.
fully electric.
Oh, interesting.
They don't have them in Canada yet. We got it brought up from California by Go Electric,
Oh, wow.
and it's great. Price used was around 20 grand, so very reasonable vehicle. I've got 3 boys at home, so fits all 5 of us nicely.
Sports, everything like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's got a little bit of space in the back. It's not huge, but it's an excellent commuter. It does everything I need.
You think a
I need to,
service guy could use that for a day?
The challenge would be how much distance you get.
Like if the average service guy did 200 kilometers a day?
No, not this one. So the battery on this particular model is about 136 kilometers in the summer.
Okay.
But-
And drops significantly in the winter, or?
Yeah, well,
100.
I mean, when I was in February when I started driving, it was pretty cold then.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I think the lowest I ever got it was maybe it went from a full charge at 136 kilometers in the summer to maybe a full charge is 113 or so expected. And again, that's going to vary depending on how much heat you turn on and off. And I mean, it's not like I'm driving in there shivering, but
Yeah.
yeah, there's all kinds of crazy driving habits. You can totally nerd out on it and try and hypermile yourself, figure out how much distance you can get, what the best settings are for everything.
Yeah.
So from a perspective of a tradesperson, is electric vehicles possible for somebody maybe who lives in an environment where potentially let's say if you're in a place like Alberta where gas is relatively inexpensive and your organization can invest in solar, or you're in a place like, let's say, Vancouver or Toronto where electricity is relatively inexpensive compared to here. Do you think there's applications where contractors or service techs, whether electrician, plumber, whoever, could use electric vehicles?
I think it's more on the sales side where electric vehicles make a little more sense. You're making a few less kilometers. You're not hauling as much heavy tools or anything. And this is more based on the size and selection and styles of vehicles that are out there on EVs. Like, they don't have a great EV traditional white service van right now, you know? With that being a limiting factor of plumbing, electrical, like, everybody's got a white service van, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean,
So could you put a solar panel on top of a?
This is actually, I want to pause here. I want to pause here because this is a very interesting question. You're buying a van soon. We talked about this yesterday.
Yeah.
So Jeff is like obsessed with van life. I'm sure you've kind of heard of it. Everybody's heard of it.
I've helped a few friends do some conversions.
So there you go. So what are you seeing in terms of the spike in demand for these hippie wannabes that want to run off and do their own thing and have a solar panel on top of their roof?
It's not even hippie wannabes. It's just people who want to
Wanderlust.
use energy.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I want to go camp in the woods, but I also still want to have my cell phone charged.
Yeah.
So everybody uses
But
that.
it's not even that. It's like I've got a small electric hot water tank that I can have a shower on, like a hot shower in the middle of nowhere, running my pump, pulling water from a river or a stream.
Just help keep the batteries topped up. Like, it may not do everything, but it'll increase the cycle time between having to run a generator out in the great outdoors, right?
So is that something that you've seen a lot of demand on?
I've seen a fair bit of demand.
Yeah.
I mean, not our specialty, but I've certainly helped a few friends with that.
Yeah. So are there like specific outfitters that do okay, so like vehicle solar is like a specific kind of thing, and so I don't know if I heard or this was something that I read about vehicles in general that come with a glass top that's actually solar integrated.
I heard of one out in Europe, but I don't know if they ever got to market.
Prototype. It's all in prototype.
It's all prototype stages right now,
and it almost the conversation becomes kind of like that when you have building integrated solar, or you have the shingles integrated solar, where it's like, does it actually perform the way you want it to? And it's like you have an electric vehicle that you're driving, and does it really charge while you're driving?
Not to any meaningful extent, right? Like, so that's the other interesting thing about seeing the energy display on my car when I'm driving around. If I'm going from a stop, I'll draw 60 kilowatts instantaneously, even in that little car. So 60 kilowatts, that's a fair bit of energy. It's only for a short amount of time, but that's a lot of energy. If I think of 60 kilowatts generation in terms of solar, that's a lot of solar panels, right? When we go back to our example of 9 panels being about a kilowatt, that's a lot of solar panels. And I mean, that's, again, short period of time, but you would need a lot to offset any significant generation. It's more for like, I think I saw one prototype for the new Tesla Cybertruck.
Yeah.
God, I love that thing. But something like that, where maybe it has a solar panel on the roof, but then in the back, you've got 3 or 4 that fold out to give you more energy generation. Maybe that's worthwhile. Again, we're dealing with quite large battery packs and relatively limited amount of energy generation.
So could you go with solar, and again, we're going to ask you a lot of different variations on how you could utilize it, but could you go to solar and go to an electric furnace and see a savings versus gas?
I don't think so.
No.
The
furnace is
based on current energy consumption and what you would need in terms of just pure amount of density. In the city, no. On an acreage, sure.
But that would mean that you would have to have maybe a field. A solar field.
Not a huge field, but just the pure amount of area we're talking about in terms of coverage.
Now, maybe I want to kind of pivot to maybe see if we can draw some kind of a recommendation by Nathan, right?
If you had a 3-car garage.
If you had a 3-car garage, your name was Jeff, and you really want to know.
We have an east-west.
You want to grow pot? No, I'm just kidding.
You can grow 4 plants, man. If I say that I let you, you can technically grow 8 because you're married. So you got anyway. What would you say would be terrible applications of solar, and your favorite, dream best applications that you would like to see of solar? Those two. Let's kind of play those two together.
There's not a lot of really terrible applications. there's just places where it's more or less efficient in terms of energy generation and cash investment. Those being our desired outcomes, generating as much energy as possible and spending less money than you need to.
Yeah.
So north-facing solar. Turns out in the northern hemisphere, the sun is generally to the south of us.
Yeah.
I've seen it on a few different projects. Installers have installed it on the north side of the house.
On purpose?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, maybe the client was asking for aesthetics, or maybe they just wanted a certain amount of generation, and that was the only space left. And don't get me wrong, you still will get some generation off that, but it's much less than south, east, or west. South being ideal, east and west still being good. My place, for example, I've got an east-west roof line. I got 10 modules on the east, another 30 on the west side. And the nice thing that the east-west shift does for you is the east modules give me more generation. They hit their peak in the morning, and then the west modules hit their peak in the afternoon. So that allows me to time shift my generation to more when I'm home in the afternoon, the evening. So.
Okay. Interesting.
And what would be, if you could pick your favorite dream project, what would that be solar-wise?
Dream project, I would love to do something huge like, have you guys heard of the Traverse project?
No. Tell us a little bit about it.
Largest solar,
You've heard of it?
Yeah.
What is it?
it's the largest solar project in Canada.
Okay.
Love to do that one. Hook me up.
Yeah.
What is it?
But no, aside from that, it's just a massive project.
Okay.
That would be something cool to have your name on as part of bringing something like that to life.
Yeah.
But in general, what I would like to do as my theoretical perfect project, I would love to do a field solar farm on some semi-viable type agricultural land, and I would like to have like goats and bees and stuff, and really show that the land can be useful for energy generation and also agricultural use still.
Well, you could actually, like, what's stopping people from actually, like, creating a canopy with solar panels and having them 15 feet off the ground and then having their
Just
stables
the
and
construction
everything
cost of
underneath?
the structure.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the biggest difference there.
Because I see a lot of the solar farms are built, like, 2 feet off the ground, and then it's kind of...
Yeah, that's mostly for grass and foliage cover, just to make sure it's high enough that it doesn't get shading easily from that.
Yeah.
Again, all these large places will have some kind of maintenance program, typically for either clearing out that vegetation, mowing it, or they'll incorporate some kind of animal cover, sheep, goats, whatever, to keep the level down.
Okay.
But yeah, I would love to do a project with like bringing the agriculture and energy generation together. I think that's really cool.
As maybe as a final kind of thought, if we could split your communication to engineers and contractors and homeowners, what would you leave as like a parting message or advice to those two groups of people on their perspective on solar, how they should implement it, whether they should implement it, all that stuff? Like, what would you kind of, if you
What's
could
the
talk,
break-even point? Just kidding.
like, what would you kind of,
8 to 16 years.
right? What would you say to these, those two groups, the contractor engineer types, and then just the homeowners, the business owners, the developers, like the investors?
I would say to the contractor engineer types, don't be afraid to ask questions and have an open mind as to what might be best for the building. And for the homeowners, I would say get multiple quotes.
Always.
Like just simple things like that. Like make sure you're vetting the people that you're going to work with and looking at different designs. I've had some homeowners come to me and they have a design in their head because they did some YouTube research, and this is going to be the best design for them, but really it's not.
So after the
ask
show,
an
can you send us a couple of typical designs that we could put up?
Yeah,
and
we could throw on a garage somewhere.
it's working. It's working. No.
Slowly but surely.
But if we could actually post a couple of typical designs in that $10,000 range, that would have that
Sure,
8 to
just show
16 year
what it would
payback
look
on
like,
an average residential house without an electric car.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Because I know that there's more and more people that are interested in that, and for any of the civilians that are watching, we'd love to give them a little bit of education as well, because that's that's kind of what we're getting to do, is educate as many people as possible. And
For sure.
I really think that there's a lot of things that I really learned today that I definitely wasn't aware of, and I really appreciate your time and
Thanks for having me.
your knowledge on the topic. Thanks, Nathan.
And if anybody does have questions, because I'm sure we've only scratched the surface,
There's
reply
a lot of notes I
in
didn't
and
get to.
And let people know how to find you, what your email, your company's website.
Yeah. So hit us up at Crestview Group. Geez, I didn't even get into describing what Crestview Group is.
Crestview Group.
Yeah. Crestview Group is the overall company. Crestview Electric is the parent and founding company, general electrical contractor, mostly commercial. Been around since 1988. Crestview Building Technologies is our automation control side, and CV Solar is my baby. Running solar. We do residential and commercial. We've done a little bit of off-grid, and we've done a little bit of utility scale as well, and hoping for more. So
Fantastic.
Perfect.
And it's nward@crestview.com.
that's correct.
And ward@crestview.com. Nathan Ward, Crestview Electric, the solar man. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.